Hello, my name's Sam, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome back to my dark office. So, today is going to be my top queer books of 2022. So I have read a fair amount of queer books this year. I've kind of made it a little bit of priority, especially when it comes to reading romance. The whole I want to see people like me in the stories that I read. Representation is really, really important, and queer representation is something that I definitely feel comfortable talking about. So let's kind of go through this. We're going to start with number 9 is actually my most recent queer read, and it is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. So this is about Astrid Parker, who is a perfectionist with some pretty hardcore anxiety, and she runs a design business. It's having a hard time. It's going under. Within the past year, her business is basically failing. She broke up with her fiance, and her mother is kind of unhappy with where she is currently at in her life. There we go. I feel like that's better. And then we have Jordan Everwood, who is the granddaughter of Prue Everwood, who owns the historic inn in their hometown. So Astrid gets hired to be the designer, the local designer for the Everwood Inn on HGTV's episode of Inside America, and Jordan is actually set to be the head contractor. So it's a little bit of a Grumpy Sunshine scenario to an extent, or more of they're faking Grumpy Sunshine for the TV show. And it's kind of their story of not only them falling in love, but more of them kind of finding their own person and learning how to be their most authentic and comfortable self. So I very recently talked about this in my queer vlog that I just posted, but I felt that I really enjoyed this book as a queer story about these two queer women finding themselves and finding how to be comfortable within themselves. I didn't really love it that much as a romance, but I think that's totally okay. Like, I still gave it 4 stars. I was still happy with it, even if it wasn't exactly the romance that I wanted it to be. It was the story that I wanted it to be. So, number 8, I actually did How to Excavate a Heart by Jake Maya Arrlo. This is about Shawnee, who is a freshman in college, and she has had a horrible breakup in her first year of college with her first ever girlfriend. So she accepts an internship at the Smithsonian studying the fossils of fish. And on her way into Washington, D.C., she hits a girl named May with her mom's car. And then it becomes a little bit of like an angsty baby gang, like a meet cute kind of vibe, where May is staying with her weatherman father for the winter break, and Shawnee gets asked to dog sit for this dog by one of her roommates, and the dog turns out to be May's father's dog. So we go from Shawnee hitting May with her mom's car to them slowly falling in love with each other after Shawnee starts walking and sitting and babysitting this dog. So it's very cute. It's a lot of self-discovery. It does have a very light description of sexual assault and an emotionally abusive relationship. It is not like detailed or graphic, but that is something that is in there. I think I gave this one a 4-star. I was really happy with it. It was really light and actually like laugh out loud funny for me throughout the book, and then we hit like the last like maybe 50 pages or so, and it was just like bam, it hits you, it turns traumatic, and it just kind of turns into a lot. And I think that my biggest gripe with this one was that Shawnee and May at the end decided that they wanted to take it slow, and the terms of their slowness is definitely kind of like stereotypical lesbian kind of slow, where it's like not actually slow at all. But I don't know. I still thought it was cute. I still thought that it had some really good messages, but it was also just fun and funny to read. Okay, so number 7 is Sorrowland by River Solomon. So Sorrowland is about Vern, who is a young girl who grew up in a little bit of a cult. I'm still going to use the word cult to describe it. I don't know if that's entirely accurate terminology, but I'm going to call it a cult, where she, as a 15-year-old, gets impregnated by like the leader of this cult, and she decides to run away. She runs into the woods, and she lives in the woods for quite a while, where she gives birth to 2 twins, and she starts to unravel like the reality of this cult and some of the medical experimentation that they have done to her, and what all of these different weird aspects that were normal in the cult Caneland are not actually normal. She has to figure out what's going on with her body, how to raise 2 children, how to be emotionally available for 2 children while going through all of these things, and learning how to be in a relationship with another person. So this story has trans rep, it has queer rep, it has not projecting gender roles onto children and just allowing them to exist. You know, it was really fast-paced and intricate, and it was a well-rounded story. And ultimately, this was really, really interesting for me. River Solomon, they have become an auto-buy author for me at this point. I thought that this book was truly just awe-inspiring, and I have had this on my shelf for like a year or two, and I deeply regret not picking it up sooner. So if you are into a little bit like sci-fi, thriller, mystery, really interesting stuff, like breaking down the history and seeing like the history of the medical abuse that people have put Black Americans through, all of that stuff, this is a really good option. I really loved this. So number 6, I put The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. So The Extraordinaries was another super cute, like laugh out loud, funny, angsty. It was a gay story. So this is about a high schooler named Nick, who for years has been writing a fan fiction about Shadowstar, an extraordinary superhero in his city. And Nick is like obsessed with the idea of becoming an extraordinary himself. He's very angsty, he's very funny, he's willing to jump into a toxic lake to try and gain powers. Little does he know, his longtime best friend is actually an extraordinary, and he is the enemy to the extraordinary that he has been obsessed with and kind of in love with for years. So this has gay representation, it has ADHD representation. I cannot speak to how accurate that is. I do not have ADHD in any capacity, but there are certain aspects of it that I definitely saw in my partner. So it was just hilarious, and it was sweet. And I read this pretty quickly after I was about to, like, I was ready to put down YA romance kind of thing after reading, I don't even remember what it was, something by Marissa Meyer, because I was just tired of seeing, like, watching teenagers go through, like, horribly awkward and embarrassing situations because they don't understand communication. And then I read this, and I guess here I am again, because I will be reading every single one of those books in that series. So, super cute, super sweet. You know, the whole concept of superheroes, are they helpful, are they hurtful, what does the city think about them, all that fun stuff. Number 5, I actually chose I Fell in Love with Hope by Lancali. This one I did a whole review about this one, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but this is a group of 6 teenagers who are in a hospital. They are chronically ill in various different ways, and it's kind of them banding together and being a little group of thieves, and the stories of how they choose to live their lives despite their illnesses, and how they choose to fight against time and death that are coming at them so rapidly. So this one was really intense. There's a lot of different identities in it, but ultimately my 2 favorite characters in this entire story were 2 gay boys who went through a lot of trauma, and some horrible things happened too. So there are many, many, many trigger warnings for a lot of different things. You can watch my video, or you can look up the book itself. The author is very forward about what trigger warnings there are, because it is independently published, so she is able to do so. So, loved that one. So number 4 is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. So this is the love story between Delilah and Claire. This is the first story in this trilogy. And Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, number 9, is the second. So Delilah Green lost her father at a young age, and was left with her stepmother and stepsister. She was always like the black sheep of the family, and she never really had a relationship or any friends in her hometown, so she moved to New York to become a photographer. She's been there ever since she was 18. Now she's 30, and she has been called home to photograph her sister Astrid's wedding, and she goes to the bar when she gets to town, and she recognizes Astrid's best friend, Claire, and Claire comes over and starts to hit on Delilah, not knowing who she is. So it's their love story unfolding from there in the aspect of a 2-week period where wedding activities are supposed to be happening. Now this does have a single mom to a teenager trope. I want to make that clear. Claire does have a teenage daughter, which I really enjoyed. That was a really good aspect of it, and I feel like it was well done. And Delilah is really, really good with her daughter. And you know what? I just thought that it was like a really cute, angsty, fun romance. You know, in the ways that Astrid Parker were more of a self-discovery story, this is more of a traditional romance. And I thought it was really cute, and I loved every second of it. So, I thought that one was really fun. Number 3, we're getting towards the top now, is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. So Under the Whispering Door is about Wallace, who is like a big partner in a law firm, and you know what, he's a pretty terrible person when he's alive, but he has a heart attack and he dies in his office, and a Reaper comes to get him, and they bring him to Hugo's tea shop. Hugo kind of is like a wayman. He's one of the people who the recently deceased come to him, and they kind of work through all of their trauma and kind of come to accept their death in his tea shop with him. So Wallace gets brought there, and he really has to work through like all of the steps of like realizing he's dead, realizing there's nothing he could do to change that, discovering like how awful of a person he actually was and all of the harm that he did within his life. And it's really heartbreaking to watch him not only fall in love with Hugo and the little family that Hugo has created at the tea shop, but to also see like the desperation on Wallace's face of like, I want to be better now, but it's too late. I sobbed a lot with this book. I loved every aspect of this book. I thought that it was amazing. TJ Klune is one of my all-time favorite authors now. Really everything that he puts out is just a win for me. So basically, if you want to read anything by TJ Klune, I recommend it as like a good queer book at this point, for the most part. He's got another one coming out in 2023 that I will talk about in my 25 most anticipated releases of 2023, and that'll be coming out later this week. So number 2 is actually the Death of Vivek Oji by Akweke Emezi. So I read this earlier in the year, and I loved this. So I kind of want to just read the synopsis for this, because I think Akweke Emezi writes some of the most heart-wrenching and impactful novels that I have ever read, and I find that I have a hard time describing what they're really about, and they really do the best job in their synopsis of telling you just enough of what their stories are about without putting away too much. So one afternoon in a town in southeastern Nigeria, a mother opens her front door to discover her son's body wrapped in colorful fabric at her feet. What follows is the tumultuous, heart-wrenching story of one family's struggle to understand a child whose spirit is both gentle and mysterious. Raised by a distant father and an understanding but overprotective mother, Vivek suffers disorienting blackouts, moments of disconnection between self and surroundings. As adolescence gives way to adulthood, Vivek finds solace in friendships with the warm, boisterous daughters of the Niger wives, foreign-born women married to Nigerian men. But Vivek's closest bond is with Osita, the worldly, high-spirited cousin whose teasing confidence masks a guarded private life. As their relationship deepens and Osita struggles to understand Vivek's escalating crisis, the mystery gives way to a heart-stopping act of violence and a moment of exhilarating freedom. So Vivek is a really interesting and complex character. And you don't really understand Vivek until you get all the way through the story. So it's kind of just, you get to learn more about Vivek and the life that came forth as you read through it. And it's hard to read. It was it was well written, but emotionally it was hard to read. And I recommend Akweke Emezi to everyone. I think that their stories are the most impactful that I've ever read, and I think that everyone needs to appreciate them and take the time to sit with the discomfort that they often bring, and kind of try and work through it yourself to break down all of the different things that are being talked about. So, The Death of Vivek Oji. Damn. Okay, and we are on to my number 1 top queer books of 2022. And that is Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. So, Take a Hint, Dani Brown is the second book in the Chloe Brown series. And I loved it. So, Dani Brown is in grad school to be an English professor. She is a bisexual black woman in academia, so we've got those hardships to follow, but she is also a perfectionist who pushes herself to complete burnout at every second of the day. And she is definitely a little bit of a player until she starts to fall in love with the security guard at her school. So this was really just it was a cute love story, but I felt like I connected with Dani Brown on such an intimate and personal level in a way that I didn't with Chloe or Eve Brown, and that's totally okay, but it made the story go from like here to up here for me. And I think that reading stories about strong women struggling in academia is something that will always be like really impactful, and it will always touch me a little bit, especially when it comes to Dani Brown, who was going to grad school to work in academia with English. Like, that's kind of always been my dream, so I'm just kind of bonding with her on a really emotional and important level for me. So, and she's just a badass. She's just a badass. She's got a shaved head. She's always coloring her hair. She's always having fun. And she really, it's not only a romance, but it's a moment of self-discovery for her to figure out her own personal boundaries and how to live a life that doesn't put you in a constant state of burnout. So, not only was the romance, like Grumpy Sunshine, super cute, just incredible, I mean, it was so impactful to spend those pages with Dani Brown for me. So, I'm going to put it on the top because I think that it was my most enjoyed. So, this has been my top queer books of 2022. Now, I will be putting out like my top 10 books of 2022 fairly soon, and there will be some overlap there, but there's definitely like a shakeup in the placement on things, but I am so excited for how my 2022 reading year went, and I think that honestly it can only go up from here. So, I guess we'll see how that goes. Let me know some of your favorite queer stories of 2022, especially if you have any like high fantasy ones. I feel like I didn't get a lot of queer high fantasy this year in any capacity, and I really want it. So, let me know what you've been reading, what you've been loving, and I guess I'll see everyone next time.